Welcome back to the Rally in the Ozarks podcast. This is season 1, episode 2. So we are kind of crawling out of the winter. We had a nice week here in the Ozarks. And then we're a little bit cooler today, but it's not so bad. But anyways, kind of getting into the spring, and it's got us thinking about waking your rig up out of the winter hibernation.
Yeah.
So, what's the first thing you like to do?
Well, I like to get the old rig out, find that first warm weekend or warm day, or maybe it's just, hey, this thing's been sitting around for a while. I want to take her out for a spin. And so I like to kind of do my waking up out of hibernation routine that I do to all of my vehicles that have been dormant for the winter. And that's just go take it for its quick little 10-minute drive and kind of get all of those fluids flowing back in and check it out. But you got to do your first little 2 or 3 things. You got to check your tire pressure, make sure everything's good there, just to where you can take it out for a drive. Then I like to bring it in and do the oil change, and I do that every year. I'll bring my rig in for the first time after the winter, and I'll just get the oil changed on it, and it's done for the year. Because I typically don't drive my classics around much more than 3,000 to 5,000 miles a year. So one oil change a year is good for me.
Yeah. And if you've taken it out on that cruise, you've kind of warmed up that oil. That's when they say you're supposed to drop the oil pan anyways, get it warmed up.
Yep.
But yeah, one thing that I've started trying to do myself, get better at, is I run Rotella in all my like old International engines, but then I'll add in that zinc additive like STP or whatever for like $10 off the shelf. A little bit more expensive, but supposed to be a lot better for your engine because the oil these days just doesn't have the zinc in it that those old cams liked.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. The new oil regulations are taking that out. I know the EPA thinks that the zinc is a issue with recycling.
Yeah.
But in the new engines, it doesn't need it. But if you have a carbureted engine, you need to add the zinc to it.
Yeah.
In my opinion,
the new engine oil is like pouring water out. Scary, crazy.
Yeah. And it's just an anti-wear agent, and those flat tappet camshafts there's a lot of metal to metal contact on that flat tappet cam or lifter, and boy, if it doesn't have that zinc in there, it'll eat them up in no time.
Yeah. Yep. So change oil, check your fluids, tire pressure. One thing that we were kind of talking about was the fuel filter.
Mm-hmm.
So what fuel filter do you like to run on yours?
The Wix 33003. It's the clear 3/8 ended. It goes right in your fuel line, and you can see right in there. It's
plastic, right?
It's plastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's the one I run on mine. Like you're saying, you can see it. You can see any debris that's coming from your tank, and they last a pretty long time. And then, do you change it every year, or do you just change as necessary? Or
yeah, I change it as necessary. It's you can see right in there and see the condition of the fuel system. You can tell if you've got a lot of rust in the system. You can tell if your fuel is gummy or varnishy, or just by the color of the fuel that's in there. So I change it when it starts to turn really brown, or when you start seeing chunks of rust or something in there.
Yeah, definitely. Like if you just get a truck on the road from sitting for a long time, you'll see that thing kind of fill up with rust, and then you can kind of keep changing it. And then by the time you've had it on the road for a couple thousand miles or whatever, it's usually pretty clear.
Right.
That kind of, I guess, one thing we could kind of talk about is the fuel that you're running into these days has a lot of ethanol in it.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, I would not run ethanol in an older fuel system, especially if it's got a carburetor on it.
Yeah.
So
no, definitely don't. If you've got your carbureted vehicle was not designed to use ethanol fuel in it, and when I say fuel system, I mean everything from the carburetor, the fuel lines, the fuel pump, the tank itself. None of that is designed to deal with ethanol. And what ethanol does, it soaks up the moisture from the environment or from the atmosphere and plugs it right into the fuel system for whatever reason. I don't know the chemistry as to how that works, but it does absorb moisture somehow.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
puts it right into the fuel system. Not only does it absorb moisture and cause your tank to rust, but it also eats away at those rubber fuel lines. And those old carbureted fuel lines weren't designed for that, and that'll gum up in there and just cause all kinds of trouble.
Yeah, I've taken apart some carburetors that have had, I would assume probably gasohol or something from the 70s, or maybe ethanol. I don't know how long they've been sitting, but anyways, you pull the top off the bowl and it's just like somebody put laundry detergent inside there, real chalky, and it eats up the pot metal. And really, the carburetor wasn't rebuildable at all. It was just, I just threw it in the trash.
Yeah.
So if you can avoid that ethanol, I would do that.
Yeah, stay away from ethanol with the carburetor rig for sure. I think there's some additives you can put into your system if that's the only choice you've got. There's some stable products out there that kind of neutralize that ethanol, I guess. Once again, I'm not a chemistry guy.
Yeah.
I get it. There's a product you can put in there that saves your stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely that could cause you a lot more problems as you're waking it up out of hibernation than really anything else, is if you've been running ethanol in there.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So that another thing, corrosive. I was telling Jay off air here, my wife had a 2013 Chevy Impala, and the battery cables would always corrode on that thing. So that's something that you could check too if it's been sitting all winter. Just make sure your battery cables aren't corroded. They've got some sprays at your local auto parts store that you can kind of spray on there. But that's something to kind of check out. A no start issue a lot of the time is a bad battery cable.
That's right. And that's a pretty neglected service item on these rigs. And every year I think that just pull that battery cables off, hit it with your little wire brush, hit the post on your battery, whether you use the top post or a side post. Just get that connection back together and just make sure it's good once a year, and you'll never have any problem with it.
Yep, I agree. Getting a little more into it, one thing I like about our older rigs is that there's a lot of grease zerks on your tie rod ends and your ball joints and stuff like that. If you're buying a good serviceable part, when you put them back together or whatever, as you kind of update them, it's nice to have a grease zerk, and I would probably hit it.
Yep. Oh yeah.
With some grease.
If you're, back in the old days, you would do a lube and filter. If you remember that was an oil change, a filter change, and a chassis lube.
Yeah.
So the old time oil change places would go through, and not so much anymore, but with these vintage or older vehicles, ball joints, tie rod ends, U-joints, anywhere that you've got a serviceable zerk there, hit it with a little grease once a year. If you're only driving 3,000 to 5,000 miles, it's good to do that with an oil change, but get the old grease in there and get everything lubed back up for the year.
Now they got like battery operated grease guns. I mean, it can take 2 seconds to hit each one.
Yep.
Boom, moving on.
Yep. And you don't have to, just a squirt or two, a lot of times over the years watching other people service their rigs, is they would put so much grease in there that it would just goop out everywhere. You don't have to get that extreme with it. Just, pay attention to, and when you're greasing that ball joint, you can watch the little rubber end kind of swell up.
Yeah.
And that's good enough. That's all you need to do. It doesn't have to come running out. Just, give it a good once over. But yeah, that's another good thing to do for the year, bringing around a hibernation, is get the grease in there.
Yeah. Just a multi-purpose grease, I guess, really.
I like the Castrol blue grease.
Blue stuff? Okay.
Yeah, it's waterproof. When especially in the off-road world where we're out doing a lot of creek crossings or, water crossings or just, getting our rigs wet pretty regular, I like to use the waterproof grease.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So you could, along those lines, probably check like your wheel bearings real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's while you're in there, pull the tire off, check your brakes, make sure they're good to go for the year. Check your wheel bearings. Even if you at least pull your dust cap off and look in there and see if there's something that's apparent. Hey, this thing is dry as a bone.
Yeah.
Or boy, there's a lot of moisture in there. You just pulling that dust cap off of that bearing or that hub will tell you a lot about what's going on in there.
Now, how do you, along those lines, this will be a hot topic of debate. How do you pack your bearings?
So I do it just the old way with the grease in the hand. I just get the high temp red grease, smear it in my hand, and I just go to cramming it in there.
Packing.
Yep.
My dad taught me how to do that when I was younger, and I don't know why. I have the Harbor Freight grease packer, and it works super well.
Yeah.
That's probably the way to go. But anyways, I still pack mine on my palm too.
Yeah, no, that's that way. I can see the grease going in. I know how much grease is getting in there. I know that it's, if I've done it right, I know it's right.
Have you ever used one of those?
I admittedly have not.
Oh, man,
and I'm pretty sure that if I did, I would just swap to it and be done with it.
So when you push it down, like you just see all the old grease, it's like squirt out.
Okay.
And you're like, oh, okay. Anyways, those are super cheap at Harbor Freight, and if you don't want to pack it on your palm, but I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah. To
sit there and just your palms are completely covered in grease.
Yeah.
But you feel like you're really doing something then.
Yeah.
So, anyways, check your bearings. Make sure they're go to your get a service manual.
Yeah.
Get a service manual. There's a lot of information on the internet. I'm guilty of doing that too. But I also do have a service manual for my Scouts, and I refer to it all the time. And that'll tell you your torque specs for your wheel bearings and stuff like that. Check it out.
That's a great point. That's probably one of the most looked beyond aspects of the maintenance program. You've got a service manual and you've got a repair manual. I think service manual is the manual that came out with your manufacturer, whether it's a Jeep, a Scout, a Ford, whatever. The service manual was that accompaniment to the product that you bought, and then you've got a repair manual, which is the aftermarket side of it, which is like the Haynes manual.
Yeah.
And you can go through that Haynes manual and it'll tell you everything you need to know. So all the specs are out there in the world, whether it's on the internet or on the manual. I'm old school. I like having a book in front of me.
Yeah.
I don't like having to get my pocket box out and wander through the Google and all that stuff to try to figure it out, because I'm about half thoughtful that a lot of the information that you get on the internet is wrong.
Yeah, it is for sure. You can search through, and if you're on like some forums and you have been a part of a forum for your vehicle for a while, you can eventually sift through the posters and see who seems to know what they're talking about and who doesn't.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, yeah, if you Google search, you'll get 5 different answers in the first 5.
Be very, very critical of the information that you get off of the internet, especially off of just people talking out there.
Like us, this is all.
Be critical of everything we say.
Check us. Check us out for sure. But a service manual, very good.
Yep.
Air filter.
Yeah. So a lot of folks will just go out and buy a new air filter. You don't have to buy a new air filter, I don't suppose. I mean, if that's you, and I mean, I know they're cheap, but for me, once a year, and if that filter looks decent, it's not full of oil, it's not, and yes, your air filter does get full of oil in these old rigs. At the PCV system, there is blow-by that's more common in these older engines than in the newer ones. So if the air filter looks pretty good, just take some compressed air and blow that thing out and have it ready to go for the year. And if not, then swap it out.
Yeah. Air filters have become pretty cheap, but if you can save 20-25 bucks, why not?
Blow it out and reuse it. If it's not, like I said, if it's not covered in oil, those crankcases do breathe into the old air boxes pretty regular. So if it's not covered in oil, then just blow it out.
On your air filters, are you a stickler for going back with the factory air cleaner? You know,
Me personally,
yeah.
no. I typically run what I call the old hot rod air filter, which is just a top and a bottom,
Okay.
and like a 14-inch air filter. Like
Yeah. Well, that's where we draw the line between each other.
you're a stickler to the factory.
I can't stand seeing the hot rod air filter on mine.
Okay.
I always want to go back with the factory air cleaner.
Yeah.
But that's fine.
Yeah, they both work.
Yep.
Actually, the factory cleaner, if it's assembled and put back together correctly, and not just the little tube that's open to the engine bay,
Yeah.
they work better. They connect the air system to the grill typically, and they draw in fresh air and not
Or-
just the
Like the one on like the Scout 2s, it runs a heat duct down to your exhaust.
Mhm.
So it kind of does the air temperature warming thing, but only if you hook that duct back up.
right. Well, I can, and I've always been an advocate for General Motors, Ford, International, Jeep, whoever your manufacturer is. They spent a ton of time and money researching and developing these ways. It's not just there for us to just take off because it's dumb. They spent tons and tons of time in there to make that to where it worked right.
Yeah.
And that heat duct you're specifically talking about there probably helped that engine warm up, gosh, I'd say 30 seconds to a minute faster than if you didn't have it on there.
Right. Yeah. Oh, anyways, if you have all the parts, it can be hard to find some of those parts and pieces, but go that route, or you can just go get a hot rod style one. It's going to work just as well.
Yeah.
Brake pads. Check your brake pads or your brake shoes. Just check your brakes. Make sure that there's not like a seal leaking. Check
Yep.
for a wheel seal leaking, or check for a axle seal leaking onto your brakes.
Mhm.
Make sure that things aren't too slippery in there.
Yeah, when you're in there, and specifically to that, when you're in there looking at all your brake parts and pieces, if you've got that tire off, if you've got your drum off, if whatever it is that you're doing for your yearly inspection, you're right, checking those axle seals, because those typically go out more often than your brakes do.
Yeah.
So whether you've got a wheel cylinder that's leaking in your brake system or an axle seal that's leaking on your differential, it's either one of those are pretty easy to change.
Yeah.
In relative, if you have much mechanical
Well,
ability.
even if you're not changing it yourself, knowing, like going through and checking some stuff out so that you're not just dropping it off at a shop
Mm-hmm.
and he says, the shop says this, and this is wrong, and you can be prepared for that.
Right.
No, hey, yes, that wheel seal was leaking.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're not changing it yourself. But yeah, I mean, super, super fun to get involved on your rigs and change it yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, the last thing you want to do is drop your old 4x4 off at a shop, and then they hit you with something that isn't true.
Right.
You know.
And that can happen. I mean, most of us in the vintage or the classic world, whether you're 4x4, a street rod, a hot rod, whatever it is that you're doing, if you're having your stuff worked on by somebody, you've really vetted them out.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of shops that work on this old stuff so much anymore. You can't just take it up to, wherever, especially in the collision world. People don't want to do paint and body work on the classics anymore either. And I know we're diving off into a whole different side of this as to
That's okay.
bringing your rig out of its slumber for the winter, but the point is that just make sure if you are having your rig worked on by somebody that you've asked around to the group, or you've reached out to a couple of the other people that are in your same genre with your rig, and you've gotten some recommendations from them.
Yeah. Kind of rounding it out, I'd say check your differentials. You got a differential at the front and the rear, and then transfer case.
Yep.
Those are all things that don't have a dipstick. So you have to usually get underneath there and pull a plug, and it won't run out, but it's a fill to the top.
Yep.
Or manufacturer spec, whatever. Make sure that your cap, speaking of that, your breather cap is working properly. So often I get underneath an old Scout, and that breather cap is just completely gummed up.
Plugged up, yep.
Yeah. There's pressure getting built up inside that case of the differential or transfer case or whatever, and that breather cap is there for a reason. Like you said,
Yep.
It was designed for a reason.
Yep.
So,
and the reason is if that breather cap is plugged and it's building pressure in there, the oil goes somewhere, and that pressure has to be released, and typically it is released by pushing oil out past the seal.
yeah.
And that's an oil leak, and a lot of people will say, man, my rear seal is leaking really bad on my transfer case. Well, many times it is the breather clogged up because the pressure doesn't have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
So it just pushes that oil right past the seal as it expands.
Yeah. And just clean it out with some brake clean or something.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's getting down to it. Now, one thing that I personally do on every vehicle that I own, since we do somewhat live in the Rust Belt, is I get underneath and spray all the bolt threads that I can with some sort of penetrating oil, so that if I do need to service a part, it's not a total fight to get that bolt or whatever off. So this would be a great time for you to get underneath there, spray your, if you got U bolts on your drive shafts or whatever, hit the threads of those, whatever, just hit any threads you see, hit those with some penetrating oil.
Yep.
Well, anything else as far as that goes that you can think of? Make sure all your lights are working.
Yeah, make sure your lights work. Make sure your brake. The only other part of the brake system I would check is my master cylinder, just to make sure it's full. And and just do a quick little once over on it in the driveway before you head out, and make sure brakes work, turn signals work, headlights work. Just keep your safety stuff, make sure it's all happy, and then you're good for the year typically.
Yeah. Last thing I kind of want to talk about is some events. We don't have a lot to talk about, but just some events that are opening up for us. The first one is our home park of Southern Missouri Off-Road Ranch is opening up on March 1st.
Or Friday, March 1st, I believe is the right date. They shut down between Thanksgiving and basically the first week of March every year, and so it's pretty exciting. S'more will open back up for a good old rest of the year. Should be a good year this year.
Yeah, I'm excited. An unofficial run out at Easter Jeep Safari.
Yeah, there's Easter Jeep does a big run every year, so the Jeep crowd usually gathers up in Moab right around Easter every year, and they do a lot of cool Jeep stuff out there.
Yeah, I got to get out to Moab soon, I guess. Sounds like
Moab is an amazing place. If you've never been there, there's tons and tons of information out there as to trails. There's all of the major GPS apps out there. You can get the trails downloaded on your GPS out there and just go out and explore. A lot of it's I think actually most of the trails that are around Moab are BLM on BLM land. So it's all public access stuff, and there's some rules. So if you're planning on going to Moab, just do a quick Google search on permits or what are needed to go out. Some of the trails you have to put in on for a permit the day before. Only a few, very few, out of the hundreds and hundreds of trails that are out there, only a few you have to have a permit to go on. So if you've never been to Moab, I would highly recommend it. It's beautiful out there.
So that is March 25th through 29th is kind of the Easter Jeep Safari.
Easter Jeep Safari are those dates. I don't know. That's the Monday through Friday. I don't know if they do it on the weekends. So but that is one of the big Jeep events of the year.
Okay. All right. Another thing locally here is the More Expo, and that's kind of like an overlanding, off-roading camping. Like, it just kind of encompasses the whole gamut of 4x4 vehicles, really.
Yep.
It's not just vintage, it's also older. There's a rally that goes from S'more, Southern Missouri Off-Road Ranch, to Moore. And it's kind of like, I haven't done it, maybe hoping to do it this year, but it's kind of like a GPS-led just route.
Yep.
Anyways, you camp at S'more, and then you go to Moore, which is in Springfield, Missouri, and that is April 19th and 20th. So it's like a Friday and Saturday, and I haven't been yet, but we're going this year, and it looks like it is just 2 full days worth of stuff to do.
Yeah.
And all the big vendors are there, so I'm excited to go to that.
Yeah, no, that's one of our biggest off-road expos here in Southwest Missouri for sure.
Yeah. Lots of other camping to do this summer, so it is time to get the trucks out and start having some fun. Speaking of fun, don't forget October 4th and 5th, Rally in the Ozarks.
Yeah.
So on Facebook, you just got to search Rally in the Ozarks. We've got a page on Instagram. It's Rally in the Ozarks. And then if you search Rally in the Ozarks on Eventbrite, you'll find it. So, yeah, that's coming up in 7-ish short months.
Yeah, it'll be a good trip. So if you haven't got your tickets, plan on it. Just throw it on your calendar if nothing else, and reach out to us if you have any questions.
Still looking for sponsors. Still looking for listener spotlight. So if you are interested in kind of having like a little 5-minute, spotlight talking about your truck, then hit me up. I'd like to have you on the show. Thanks for listening.
Take care.